Hey, welcome back to Deck Check. My name is Ganesh, and today we'll be checking out the top 16 decks of Lotus Series 2, a paid tournament with 108 entrants. I came in second place in this tournament and had an absolutely amazing top 4 match, linked below. Also, I had a really crazy game with 3 mana crypts in play by turn 3. I really need to share with y'all before we get into the top 16. It wasn't a very long match. I was able to drop Mana Crypt, Tymna, and dash into Ragavan on turn 1. Player 2 played an Imp Seal on his turn 1, and I dashed in Ragavan again to steal his Mana Crypt off the top. And then on turn 3, I attacked another player who happened to have another Mana Crypt on top, and then on turn 4, I stole his Defense Grid and I was able to win the same turn. Very crazy game, and you really don't see 3 Mana Crypts on one side of the board in a game very often. Anyway, with that, let's get into our top 16. So we're going to start at the 16th place and work ourselves all the way back to the top. So starting at number 16, we have Francisco Thrasios. So this is a pretty new deck, relatively. I mean, Francisco wasn't even printed that long ago. This is going to be a control style deck with Francisco kind of operating as a combo outlet. So if you have a Walking Ballista and you can put it in your graveyard and then Agatha's Soul Cauldron to put a counter on Francisco, it will have the activated abilities of Walking Ballista, and you can remove a counter, deal damage. Francisco will explore, and that will just kind of go infinite there. The rest of the deck is basically just a control shell. There's also Devoted Druid, which has an infinite with this artifact down here. Find it, Machine's got Effigy, where you can copy Devoted Druid and put -1/-1 counters on it, but it's an artifact, and it has tap, add blue, and it's not a creature. But the rest of it is fairly standard. We have a lot of control things here, control counter spells. We have some tutors here for creatures. We have some clone effects. We have a board wipe. So fairly standard. This is more of a mid-range deck that seeks to leverage Thrasios' draw ability along with powerful green staples to control your opponents. So Manglehorn's also a very good addition in this deck. So, moving on. We have Crom Tevish. So this is a pretty staple in the meta kind of deck. It's a lot like Blue Farm, but we have Tevish instead of Tymna, and this deck tends to run a little bit faster, in my opinion. This list looks a little slower than most Tevish Croms that I've seen. There's a Hullbreaker Horror in here, which is a very good card, but it also costs 7 mana, and I have not seen that in a lot of Tevish Crom lists. Maybe that'll change in the future. We also have Kitten here, which is just a very good card to draw us a lot of mana. Even flickering, say, Tevish can be a lot of value, because every time we blink Tevish, we can activate his +1 again and keep drawing cards. So it can be a very powerful paired with Tevish Sot. Aside from that, we have a Clone Effect. We have Talion here, which is popping up in more lists. Notion Thief, which is a very interesting add. Hating on draw is good, but this card has kind of fallen out of favor in the meta for a long time just because it's 4 mana and 1 toughness. So it just dies to Bowmasters very easily. So we haven't seen this as much. Aside from that, this list is playing Beseech, which is fine. You see this in a lot more turbo lists than anything else. Maybe your lists that are very keen on getting their One Ring out, because this card is basically like a second copy of the One Ring. You can tutor for it and just cast it immediately because it's 4 or less value. But aside from that, it's a fairly standard Grixis turbo kind of shell. We have a few hate pieces here. We have a Curse Totem, which is interesting. We have the Ring, of course, and we have Imposter Mech, which is actually a pretty good card in general. And the rest of it just kind of looks a little bit like Blue Farm. So, moving on. We have, this one's interesting. So we have a Dimir partner pairing of Zelix Sanity Flare and Scion of Halaster. So I'll just explain what these do, because you probably haven't seen these before. So whenever a player mills a card, you make a 1/1 Black Horror, and then you can pay a mana and tap to make someone mill 3 cards. This ability doesn't seem that good at first glance, but keep in mind the amount of top deck tutors we have in the format. So for example, we have like Worldly Tutor, Mystical Tutor, Vamp Tutor, Imperial Seal. This card basically just shuts those all off, and you can activate this as instant speed once this has lost its summoning sickness. The background for this commander is the first time you would draw a card each turn, you look at the top 2 of your library, and then you put one in your graveyard and the other on top of your library, and then you draw a card. So this will help put us some cards in the graveyard for us, and also it will just give us more selections with the Scry. So it's a pretty powerful enchantment, and it only costs 2 mana, which is very good. We have a Search Hater here. Aside from that, we have some fairly standard blue creatures. There are some interesting includes here. So Nimble Obstruction is kind of weird. This can stop someone from winning with Thoracle and is uncounterable. You can just pay 3 mana, you cycle it, and it just counters a activated or triggered ability, which is pretty strong. We have this Guild Mage where you can activate this ability. It's a little bit of a weird card, but so you can use his the commander's activated ability to mill someone for 3, and then if this is up, they will lose 3 life. And this is also kind of an infinite outlet. You can mill everyone out if you have this on the board. I imagine this also pairs well if people are trying to brain freeze and things like that. So if someone's trying to win a breach and you just activate this, they're just going to die. So pretty good anti-brain freeze cards. We haven't seen this on a lot of any lists, really. It's the first time I'm seeing it. But I'm sure it has a good spot in this deck. Something else that's kind of cool is Liberator Urza's Battlethopter. So this is going to give all our artifact spells flash. This is a card you see in a lot of Stax lists sometimes and colorless lists, because giving all your stuff flash lets you ramp out really quickly on someone else's turn, especially if there's like a Blind Obedience or something, and then you get to your turn and you can untap with everything up. So it's a pretty good card. And then we have this card which is kind of interesting. It's just kind of a mill thing, but it copies too. So clone effects are popping up more and more, and this is just another kind of weird clone, as is Sun Double, which is just a clone, but it has flash, so very good. This is our blue Grand Abolisher here. Costs 5 mana, but still very good. Rest of the deck seems to be fairly standard in control. I don't see anything too out of the ordinary here. There's a Blood Chief's Ascension here, which is going to just start killing people. And aside from that, we have a Scheming Symmetry, which is very good in this deck, because we can use it and then we can just mill the person that searched their library so they don't get the card. It's almost like it's basically a one-sided tutor in this deck. So as for how this deck actually wins, it seems to just kind of want to grind you out and just kind of sit there. Like we're running Trick Bind, so we're really trying to just gotcha people, it seems like, with this deck. I mean, we also have ISO Rev, which will mill people all out. We have Mind Crank, which goes infinite with this card up here. So, very cool list. I would definitely recommend checking out. And yeah, I'll have the bracket linked in the description. Next up, Jensen Lure. So this is a 5-color kind of value deck. Not sure how else to put it. So this is going to leverage Jensen's 5-color commander identity and Loris's recursion engines, so you can just keep getting back whatever pieces you want. So you can keep getting back, like, say, a Lotus Petal. You can get back your Dockside if you want. Just a lot of good things in the game that cost 2 mana or less. You can get back a clone. A card I saw in this list was kind of interesting is this Priest of Fell Rites. So you can pay 3 life and sacrifice it and just reanimate something. Doesn't seem like there's that many crazy reanimation targets. I think it's really just for Hermit Druid. We're not trying to go use this for value. We are literally just trying to reanimate Hermit Druid and mill everything out and then flash back and get our Thoracle. Another cool card this deck is running is Mists of Lorien. You don't really see this too much, especially since it's a sorcery, but this is like a mini board wipe. You can bounce everything that's, say, 0, and that'll kill every mana rock that's 0, as well as treasures. So kind of an interesting card. I'm not sure I would run it. But perhaps in this deck it makes sense, seeing as it might be a bit of a slower, more controlling approach. Aside from that, it runs all the good, 5 color cards, it seems. All the good counter spells, all the good removal. We have a Chord here for some instant speed tutors. We're also on Breach, so like it's basically a deck that's running all the good cards. Also Counterbalance, which kind of should clue you in. This is much more of a hard control deck than it is anything else, and doesn't mind waiting to win. So very cool. I'd recommend checking this one out as well. All right, Kinnan. So probably don't need to talk about this one too much. We all know what's going on. He's going to sit there. He's going to make big mana, start flipping Kinnan, control the board as much as they can. And we're going to have some big boys down here. And then we'll eventually win by Basalt shenanigans or something of that nature. Maybe try to get a ring out for a draw engine. Just that sort of idea. Very standard. Running some more clones. And Soulless Jailer to kind of hate on graveyard decks as well as endurance. So pretty standard list, but good job to this player for getting this far. Okay, Blue Farm. This list looks very similar to my list. A lot of the Blue Farm lists look fairly similar nowadays, so nothing wrong with that. The Sheoldred is not something I would run, but it makes sense, especially since I feel the meta is slowing down. Aside from that, looks very, very standard. They are on a wheel, which we don't see as often these days. This really just looks very standard. We are on the final portion here. We're on Snap. And nothing else too crazy here. We're all on Tide. So yeah, this looks like a much slower version, actually. Running a lot more 4-drops and slower cards. So this deck is looking more to fight in the late game, it feels like. Alright, a Joda deck. So this is actually a Stax deck, which is very weird. It looks like we don't mind leveraging Joda's ability to just beat people to death sometimes. This looks a little bit like Sisay. So we have Skrelv in there for some reason, which is basically just a Mother of Runes, which is not something we really see too often anymore, unless we're really trying to protect some sort of creature combo. I imagine it's really just there to protect our commander, so we don't have to recast it, because it can be kind of big to cast. But aside from that, yeah, we have some Staxy creatures. We have Boromir here. We have Kunaros, Graveyard Hate here. We have Kutsil, which is another Grand Abolisher. This is kind of weird. It's just going to stop people from tutoring too much, and eventually just start killing people, because if 3 people crack fetches, is going to be a 5/5, and the more they fetch and tutor and all that, the bigger this is going to get. I can see this getting very big very fast, so definitely don't sleep on this card. Oh, and yeah, we have Sisay in the deck as well, which can help us find out our, Emil Dockside lines, and honestly, this is a very cool deck. Definitely recommend checking this out. So yeah, we're running this board wipe here. We're running Veil, and Survival of the Fittest. So it's definitely a very much of a toolbox deck, where it seems like you just kind of go and you grab what you need, or you hope to cascade into it. So if you're against, say, like a turbo deck, you can try to go for like Boromir and shut off all their free mana rocks and things of that nature, or maybe go for Kunaros and turn off their Breach, that sort of thing. So very interesting. You don't see decks like these often. Definitely recommend checking this out. All right, so next up we have Ob Nixilis. So this is like a turbo mid-range kind of deck. It definitely can go very fast. We have a lot of decent Rakdos creatures here, and some that are specific to the commander. So like this card, it's going to deal 1 damage to everyone whenever they deal a card, as long as you have another red permanent. And that's just going to keep buffing up our commander here. We have a tutor for a creature here. Mayhem Devil very strong in this deck, as it is in a lot of Rakdos decks. And the rest of the deck is kind of like ad nauseum focused. We have a lot of fast mana, some rituals, some interaction here. Pyrobash Road Blast. We have a Final Fortune. Bolt Bend here for interaction, and ad nauseum. Defense Grid here, and Conqueror's Flare to try to shut off interaction. It's worth noting this deck can also go for the mid-range kind of grind plan, and it's really not bad at it at all, because Ob Nicholas can get very, very big, and it will just start killing people if players aren't ending the game. So you kind of have to watch out for that. But aside from that, fairly standard Rakdos kind of turbo list. And this also does go infinite with Ob Nicholas. So very cool. Next up, we have another Francisco Thrasios. This is the same list, actually. So we won't go over this, but yeah, definitely check it out if you're interested. Kingdom Mid-Range by Woodland Satellite. If you're interested, I'd say go ahead and read his primer. He will probably do a better job of explaining it than I will. But basically, this is a different style of Kingdom than we usually see. You're just going to kind of sit there and stop anyone from doing anything at all, or at least try to, and then kind of win with Kinnon's activated ability, or just sitting there and hard casting your big creatures and winning the game that way. You're basically trying to grind the game to a halt as much as you can. And there's Trinisphere is a very prime example of what this deck is really like. So very cool. Check out his primer again if you are interested in learning more. All right. So next up we have Corval by John Angel. Corval has been coming back in popularity. It's been doing a lot better than I think anyone has expected random turbo deck to do. But no, it's been doing great. And this player specifically has been doing very well. He won a tournament not that long ago, so congrats on that. But yeah, this is a deck that can turbo out very quickly, especially if you get a good dockside. Or it's also happy to kind of wait a little bit, get Corval out, and this is such a powerful card that it doesn't matter that much if he comes down on like turn 4 or 5 and then starts drawing you cards, because he just draws you so many cards that, like, as long as you don't lose and you're not like in an unwinnable position, it's not that difficult to recover, because you can play Corval, you can like sack your Tinderwall or whatever and draw a card, and then, you know, make some treasures, and each of those is going to draw you a card, and it just gets out of hand so quickly. Yeah, so very interesting. We have a Jund deck in general in top 16s nowadays. I think it's really cool. But yeah, we run a lot of standard stuff, of course, ad nauseum. We have a Saw in half for dockside shenanigans, things of that nature. This goes infinite with Prospector and dockside. A lot of ramp here. Curse Mirror, that's our kind of clone effect. And then some reanimation and breach. So very cool. Check him out in the link if you choose. Okay, Cephras. So I have not seen this either before, but this is going to be an Esper kind of control deck. So whenever one or more creature cards are put into the graveyard from anywhere, you venture into the dungeon. The dungeon is basically a bunch of these mini abilities where it's like one of them is like Scry, or like you make a treasure token, like small things like that. But once you get into the end of the dungeon, you get like a larger reward, like you draw cards or something like that. So anyway, this is very value focused commander, because to actually get to this last part where whenever you complete a dungeon, you reanimate something, this is going to take like quite a few turns, because this ability can only trigger once a turn. So you're going to have to wait like probably at least 2 turn cycles, 1 or 2 turn cycles for this to actually go off. I mean, it depends on the dungeon you're doing, right? The Lost Mines of Phandelver you can get it done pretty quick. But regardless, this is going to take a while. But aside from that, it's like a Esper very hard control list. This looks a little bit like Timna and Malcolm, if you've seen those before, but heavier on the stack. So we have this Rule of Law effect here. We have Thalia over here. Braids, which can be pretty backbreaking if it comes down early. Brina is a very interesting include. It's very powerful, don't get me wrong, but it's I feel like it's kind of slow. We have a lot of heavy Stax creatures. So, and it's Ishana's, which is a new card we haven't seen before. Oh, this deck's also running the initiative to kind of fuel that dungeoneering sort of thing, and it's also running some more dungeoneering support. So it looks like this is very heavy on just getting stuff right back out of our graveyard, and we have some really, really heavy hitters. Like this is like the heaviest you will probably ever see a cEDH deck be. So like, look at the curve of this stuff, like Void Winnower, Sphinx of the Second Sun, Toxeril, this thing, Elish Norn, this thing. So these are just huge, huge creatures. I think this mana curve is probably even higher than Kinnon's. So yeah, so like something else you probably want to note about this is like a lot of these creatures have cycling abilities. So it's very easy for you to just put them into the graveyard. And then once they're there, you can just use your commander and get them back out because you paid like 1 mana to put it there. And then you use the ability and you get back out like a 5/7 or a, you know, something insane. So this is kind of similar to that Kinnon Grind into Dust kind of list we saw before, but it's an Esper and it looks definitely a lot slower in terms of explosive potential. It's just going to kind of sit there and try to slow everyone else down rather than racing ahead and trying to win. So very cool. It's not often we see a initiative focused deck in top 16 and a heavy Rule of Law deck at that as well. So super interesting, honestly. Please check this deck out. Take a look. All right. That was 4th place. We're getting into the top 4. This is Freedom Waffle's list of Blue Farm. He is on Boromir. I am not. And I'm trying to see if there's anything else crazy. He is on a wheel, which I am not. But aside from that, fairly standard. Southern Tide, which again, I am not. So it looks like a lot of the Blue Farm lists, besides myself, are actually on Smothering Tide, which is might be telling me something. Maybe I should put that in. But anyway, so fairly standard Blue Farm list. Yeah, it looks fairly similar to my list as well. Not too much to say here. We all know what it does. We're going to try to get an advantage with these 2 engines and then try to win with Breach or Thoracle. Not too crazy. We have another Blue Farm also in 3rd. This one is on Teferi, which I am, and it is on Boromir as well. Phyrexian Metamorph has a clone effect. Angel's Grace, which is actually almost super impactful in the finals. I don't want to spoil anything, but definitely go watch the top 4 match if you haven't yet. It was one of the best games of Magic I've ever played. So yeah, definitely try that. Check out that link. Aside from that, fairly standard Blue Farm list, and the same will apply to my list as well. I'm running a very standard list. Nothing in here that I would consider too crazy. Yeah, I just try to run the best cards I can, whatever that may be. Yeah. So anyway, let's move on to the winner. So this is a Derevi Turbo list. He was unfortunately in our top 4 game able to get down the 1 ring very quickly, and after that he just never really left the board, and he just kept untapping it and putting down Derevi and drawing bunches of cards. Not much we could really do. I misplayed a little bit in that last match, quite a bit, and generally speaking. There's probably things I could have done better, but you learn, and that's how you get better. So it's all good. Definitely congrats to him for winning. This is kind of like One Ring the deck. So, I mean, a lot of these cards specifically aren't as important as the fact that you are trying to get One Ring, you're playing Derevi, you are controlling everyone else, and you're just getting absurd card advantage, which is exactly what happened in our top 4 match. But aside from that, this is Bant. So it kind of feels like the card quality is suffering like a little bit here. We don't have like very many tutors or anything, so it could be a little hard to get what we need. This is kind of offset by the fact that this can draw so many cards if we get the ring going. But yeah, so we have some Grand Abolisher effects. We have Kutzil, we have clones, We have a Ranger Captain here. We have Thought Adele to try to steal like Mana Crypt. Or really what this is trying to get is the One Ring, because this is a One Ring deck. So we have Emil, which combos with Derevi and Gaia's Cradle to make infinite green as long as you have enough creatures. And then you can filter that out into any color you want once you have the infinite green. Toski is a kind of a draw engine here. We have a Clone Effect with Flash. We have Deadeye, which similar to Emil, it goes infinite with Derevi and Gaia's Cradle or any sufficiently mana producing thing. So this list is also on Angel's Grace, which is something we're seeing more for some reason. I mean, it makes sense if someone's trying to win quickly with Thoracle, you can just completely screw them with this. And this also, go watch the top 4 match. I don't want to spoil, but this was very, very important in that game. It was very cool to see. Yeah, so we're on a few tutors here. We have Wargate, which is not that great, but it can grab anything, so I mean, it's okay. Ephemerate can let you untap things with Derevi, whatever you want again, so it's pretty good. Legolas is Quick Reflexes, a very, very underrated card. This is probably one of the best cards I've seen come out in the last year, so definitely don't sleep on this. Aside from that, we're running all the standard control things. Here's another creature tutor, a couple of them. Running a lot of counter spells, some fast mana. It's on Shorekai, which is not a draw engine we see too often in decks that aren't Shorekai, but it's good. I used to play Shorekai. It's good in general. A little slow, but certainly good. And we can untap this with Derevi, so it synergizes with the deck and it's good overall, so it definitely makes sense why this is included. We have Birthing Pod to try to search what we need. We have One Ring, of course, the main thing of the deck. And then we're running some Stax effects like Blind Obedience and some of their Stax creatures like Dauntless Dismantler, that sort of thing. All right, so yeah, that'll do it for this top 16. Hope you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you later.